Sarah Martinez wiped her hands on her coveralls for the dozenth time as the transport shuttle approached the Galactic Council station. The massive structure hung in space like a metallic flower, its countless docking bays glowing with the lights of 1,000 different species.
First time
ships.
seeing the Nexus?
She pressed her face to the small porthole, watching vessels that defied every law of physics she thought she knew gliding past in perfect formation. First time seeing the Nexus, asked the Centauri pilot, his forearms working the controls with fluid grace that made Sarah dizzy to watch. First time seeing anything bigger than a space station, Sarah admitted, unconsciously patting the worn tool belt around her waist. The familiar weight of her sonic wrench and plasma cutter was the only thing keeping her grounded. Still can't believe they picked me for this. The pilot's laugh sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The council's selection process is unique. Though I must say, you're the first representative I've transported who brought their lunch. Sarah glanced down at the brown paper bag clutched in her free hand. Inside were 3 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, a thermos of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, and 2 chocolate chip cookies she'd grabbed from the batch she'd made for Emma's school fundraiser. The bag was already showing grease stains from the cookies, and she worried it would fall apart before she even made it to the registration desk. My daughter made them, she said, which wasn't entirely true. Emma had helped by standing on a chair and dramatically declaring each sandwich perfect while Sarah cut off the crusts. Figured I might get hungry. The docking procedure took another hour, during which Sarah watched through the porthole as beings that looked like they'd stepped out of humanity's wildest science fiction dreams moved about the station's exterior. Insectoid creatures in environmental suits scuttled along maintenance corridors. Beings of pure energy danced between the station's sensor arrays. A group of what appeared to be living trees tended to some kind of garden growing on the station's outer hull. "Welcome to Nexus Station," announced the pilot as the shuttle settled into its berth with a gentle thud. Dock 47C. The Council's registration office is on Level 15, Section Delta. Just follow the green lights. Sarah shouldered her small duffel bag and clutched her lunch tighter. Thanks for the ride. Good luck, Sarah Martinez of Earth, the pilot said, and something in his tone made her look back. The galaxy is watching. The airlock cycled with a soft hiss, and Sarah stepped into controlled chaos. The docking bay buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy prepared for the Council's trials. She'd read the briefing materials during the 3-week journey from Earth, but seeing it in person was overwhelming. To her left, a group of Krillian warriors sparred with weapons that seemed to be made of crystallized lightning. Their movements were so fast they appeared as blurs, leaving afterimages that crackled with bioelectric energy. Each warrior stood nearly 3 meters tall, their scaled skin shifting through different colors as their emotions changed. Currently, they were all deep purple, which the briefing materials had identified as their combat state. To her right, Nexari soldiers moved in perfect unison, their eyes glowing with the same pale blue light. They wore no armor, but their skin had a metallic sheen that suggested some form of technological integration. One of them turned to look at Sarah, and, for a moment she felt a strange tickling sensation in her mind, as if someone was trying to read her thoughts. The sensation vanished as quickly as it came, and the Nexari soldier returned to his synchronized movements with his unit. Beyond them, Thokarian berserkers sharpened claws the size of dinner plates while their pack leaders barked orders in a language that sounded like controlled avalanches. The Thokarians were the most intimidating of all the warrior species present, standing 4 meters tall with bodies that seemed designed for maximum destruction. Their natural armor was thick enough to stop most energy weapons, and Sarah had seen footage of them literally tearing apart enemy starships during their planet's assessment trials. Sarah felt very small and very human as she made her way through the crowd toward the registration area. Her steel-toed work boots squeaked on the polished deck plating, and she became acutely aware that every other species present seemed to have evolved some form of natural weaponry. Claws, fangs, bioelectric discharge, neural manipulation, acid blood, natural armor plating. Humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage appeared to be their ability to sweat efficiently and their opposing thumbs. The registration desk was staffed by a being that looked like a cross between an octopus and a computer terminal. Multiple tentacles worked at different consoles simultaneously while a central eye cluster tracked the steady stream of applicants. Species designation, the clerk asked without looking up as Sarah approached. Human. From Earth. This got the clerk's attention. All 6 eyes swiveled to focus on her, and Sarah had the uncomfortable feeling of being scanned by some kind of advanced sensor array. Ah yes, the late addition to the trials. Your species application was quite unconventional. The clerk's tentacles continued working as he spoke, pulling up files on multiple screens. No prior galactic contact, no stellar empire, no advanced military technology. Yet your planet's governing body seems confident you can contribute to the Galactic Defense Force. That's what they tell me, Sarah said, trying to project more confidence than she felt. Though honestly, I think there might have been some kind of mistake in the selection process. The Council's testing algorithms are quite sophisticated, the clerk replied, handing her a datapad with several tentacles while stamping documents with others. They've identified you as humanity's optimal representative for these trials. Follow the blue lights to Processing Area 7. Your quarters are on Level 23, Section Alpha. Trials begin in 72 standard hours. Sarah took the datapad and stared at the alien script scrolling across its surface. After a moment, the text shifted to English, though some of the terms remained untranslated. Is there a commissary or something where I can get food? She asked. Level 5 has nutritional dispensing facilities calibrated for most species requirements. However, I should warn you that human dietary needs are still being analyzed. The safety of station-provided nutrition for your species cannot be guaranteed. Sarah patted her lunch bag. That's okay, I brought my own. The clerk's eye cluster focused on the bag with what might have been curiosity. Fascinating. Most species arrive with their traditional battle rations or combat stimulants. What is your preferred pre-combat nutrition? Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, Sarah said, feeling slightly ridiculous. I am not familiar with this warrior sustenance. Is it designed to enhance reflexes or increase muscle density? Not really. It's just food. Tasty food. The clerk made what might have been a note in his files. Interesting psychological warfare technique. Appearing unthreatening while concealing your true capabilities. Very cunning. Sarah decided not to correct this assumption. If the galaxy's advanced species wanted to believe that peanut butter sandwiches were some form of elaborate human battle strategy, she wasn't going to argue. The blue lights led her through corridors lined with viewing ports that showed the infinite expanse of space beyond. Other candidates moved through the halls, most of them in groups that stuck to their own species. The few times Sarah tried to nod politely to other beings, she received responses ranging from curious head tilts to what she interpreted as aggressive posturing. Processing Area 7 turned out to be a vast chamber filled with testing equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Medical scanners, combat simulators, psychological evaluation booths, and devices whose purposes Sarah couldn't even guess at. Sarah Martinez of Earth? A tall, thin being with silver skin and too many joints approached her. I am Evaluator Kess. I will be conducting your initial assessment. Nice to meet you, Sarah said, extending her hand before realizing that Kess had no hands in the traditional sense. His arms ended in clusters of manipulator tendrils that writhed constantly. Kess stared at her outstretched hand for a moment. Is this a threat display? No, sorry, it's a greeting. We shake hands. It's a cultural thing. Ah, a ritual combat challenge. Very good. Kess extended his tendrils, and Sarah found herself shaking what felt like a bundle of warm rubber cables. Your species shows proper respect for combat tradition. Sure, Sarah agreed, deciding that explaining human handshakes wasn't worth the effort. The assessment process took 6 hours. Sarah was scanned, probed, tested, and analyzed by equipment that hummed and beeped in frequencies that made her teeth ache. She demonstrated her technical skills on alien machinery that somehow worked exactly like the fusion reactors she maintained back on Earth. She solved tactical problems that seemed designed to test her ability to think under pressure. She answered psychological questions that ranged from straightforward to completely incomprehensible. Through it all, she kept her lunch bag close by, taking breaks to nibble on her sandwiches when the testing grew particularly intense. Each time she opened the bag, nearby evaluators would exchange meaningful glances and make notes on their data pads. Your results are quite anomalous, Evaluator Kess informed her as the session concluded. Your physical capabilities are within normal parameters for your species, but well below galactic military standards. Your technological understanding is sophisticated but narrowly focused. Your psychological profile suggests high empathy levels and strong problem-solving skills, but no apparent predisposition toward violence. Is that bad? Sarah asked. It is unprecedented, Kess admitted. Most species that reach interstellar status have been shaped by conflict. Their representatives typically show enhanced aggression, advanced tactical thinking, and reduced empathy toward other species. You appear to be the opposite of what we would expect from a successful warrior culture. Sarah unwrapped her second sandwich. Maybe that's because we're not really a warrior culture. I mean, we have wars and stuff, but mostly we're just trying to figure things out and take care of each other. Intriguing deception, Kess noted, making more entries on his data pad. Maintaining your cover story even under clinical evaluation shows exceptional mental discipline. It's not a cover story, it's just the truth. Of course it is, Kess agreed in a tone that suggested he believed nothing of the sort. Your quarters are prepared. Meal schedules, training rotations, and combat preparation sessions begin tomorrow at 0600 station time. I recommend you rest well. The next 3 days will determine whether humanity earns a place in the Galactic Defense Force or remains isolated on your small planet. Sarah's quarters turned out to be a small but comfortable room with a bed that adjusted itself to accommodate human physiology, a desk equipped with translation software, and a viewing port that looked out at the starfield beyond. She set her remaining sandwich and cookies on the desk and tried to process everything that had happened. 3 days ago, she'd been doing routine maintenance on Reactor 7 at the Meridian City power plant, looking forward to getting home in time to help Emma with her science project about renewable energy sources. Her biggest worry had been whether the reactor's secondary cooling system would need replacement parts before the next quarterly inspection. Now she was representing the entire human species in trials that would determine whether Earth remained alone in the galaxy or joined some kind of interstellar military alliance. And everyone seemed to think she was either hopelessly outmatched or engaged in some elaborate psychological warfare campaign. She took a bite of her sandwich and stared out at the stars. Somewhere among those distant lights was a small blue planet where her daughter was probably doing homework and wondering when mommy would come home. Emma had been so excited when the government officials explained that her mother had been selected for an important space mission. She'd made Sarah promise to bring back pictures of aliens and stories about spaceships. Sarah had no idea how she was going to explain that the aliens all seemed to think humans were either brilliant tactical minds or hopelessly primitive savages, and that the fate of Earth might depend on how well she did in combat trials she wasn't qualified to participate in. She finished her sandwich and opened her datapad to review the trial schedule. Physical combat assessments, tactical simulations, leadership evaluations, and something called crisis response protocols that sounded ominous. Each section would be observed and judged by representatives from the Council's member species. As she read, Sarah became aware of sounds from the corridor outside her quarters. Heavy footsteps, chittering voices, and what sounded like mechanical whirring. She pressed her ear to the door and listened to fragments of conversation in various alien languages. The translation software in her room caught occasional phrases. Human seems inadequate for combat trials. No visible weapons or armor. Possibly some form of stealth warrior. That strange sustenance bag might contain chemical weapons. Sarah looked at her remaining cookies and sighed. Tomorrow she would have to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars, armed with nothing but her mechanical skills, problem-solving abilities, and snack food that everyone apparently thought was some form of advanced military technology. She wrapped up the cookies carefully and placed them in the small storage compartment next to her bed. If the galaxy wanted to believe that chocolate chips were humanity's secret weapon, she wasn't going to argue. At least not until she figured out what she was actually supposed to do in these trials. Outside her window, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small human who had somehow become responsible for her entire species' future. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to remember the feeling of Emma's arms around her neck during their goodbye hug. Whatever happened in the next 3 days, she was going to find a way home to her daughter. Even if she had to invent humanity's first interstellar diplomatic crisis to do it. Sarah woke to the sound of her door chime and the gentle hum of the station's artificial gravity generators cycling to morning mode. The chronometer beside her bed displayed 0530 in glowing alien numerals that her brain was slowly learning to interpret. She'd managed about 4 hours of sleep, her dreams filled with images of her daughter asking why mommy hadn't come home yet. Sarah Martinez of Earth, came a voice through the door's communication system. This is Training Coordinator Vex. Report to Combat Arena 3 in 30 minutes for your first trial assessment. Sarah rolled out of bed and stumbled toward the small hygiene facility attached to her quarters. The sonic shower was still an alien experience, cleaning her with sound waves and energy fields instead of water, but it was efficient. She pulled on her cleanest coveralls, checked that her tools were secure in her belt, and grabbed her lunch bag. The remaining sandwich from yesterday had gotten slightly soggy overnight, but the cookies still smelled like home. Sarah ate one while reviewing the trial information on her datapad. Physical combat assessment would test her ability to function in various battlefield scenarios. She would be paired with representatives from other species to complete objectives while under fire from automated defense systems. The corridor outside her quarters buzzed with activity as candidates from various species made their way to different training areas. Sarah noticed that most of them wore elaborate armor or carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. She felt decidedly underdressed in her work coveralls. "Human," a gravelly voice called out behind her. Sarah turned to see a Thokarian warrior approaching, his massive frame requiring him to duck slightly to avoid the corridor's ceiling. His natural armor plating gleamed under the artificial lights, and his claws left small scratches in the deck plating with each step. Yes?" Sarah said, unconsciously backing against the wall to give the massive being more room. "I am Krex of the Ironback clan. You are the human representative?" "That's me. Sarah Martinez." Krex studied her for a long moment, his predator's eyes taking in every detail of her appearance. "You carry no visible weapons. Your armor appears to be..." He paused, searching for words. "Decorative fabric?" "These are work clothes. I'm a maintenance engineer." "Ah," Krex nodded knowingly, "you are a saboteur. Very cunning. Appear harmless while striking at enemy infrastructure." Sarah was beginning to recognize a pattern in how other species interpreted human behavior. "Not exactly. I fix things that break. Mostly fusion reactors and life support systems." "Yes, exactly," Krex agreed with what might have been approval. "Disable enemy life support, 'cause their power systems to fail. Efficient killing without direct confrontation. Your species has a talent for warfare psychology." "We really don't." "I look forward to observing your techniques in today's trials," Krex interrupted. "Perhaps the Ironback clan can learn from human stealth methods." The Thokarian continued down the corridor, leaving Sarah to wonder if there was any way to convince the galaxy's species that humans weren't elaborate military strategists pretending to be ordinary people. Combat Arena 3 turned out to be a vast chamber that could apparently reconfigure itself into any battlefield environment imaginable. When Sarah arrived, the space resembled a war-torn cityscape complete with damaged buildings, burning vehicles, and the distant sound of weapon fire. Holographic smoke drifted through the air, and she could smell the acrid scent of burned electronics. Training Coordinator Vex looked like a centipede that had learned to walk upright and developed a passion for military organization. His multiple arms gestured constantly as he explained the trial parameters to the assembled candidates. "Today's assessment will test your ability to work as a unit while accomplishing mission objectives under combat conditions," Vex announced, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. "You will be divided into mixed species teams of 4. Your objective is to reach the command center at the arena's far end and extract critical intelligence data. Automated defense systems will attempt to stop you using non-lethal but highly uncomfortable deterrent methods." Sarah looked around at her fellow candidates. Besides herself, there were 3 Nexri soldiers with their characteristic synchronized movements, two Krillian warriors whose scales were already shifting to combat purple, a Thokarian berserker who was flexing claws that could probably cut through starship hull plating, and several representatives from species she didn't recognize. Team assignments are as follows, Vex continued, consulting a datapad that required 4 arms to operate properly. Team Alpha, Nexury Squad Leader Zeth, Krillian Battle Prime SIX, Thokarian Warrior Krex, and Human Technical Specialist Sarah Martinez. Sarah felt a mix of relief and terror. At least she'd be working with Krex, who seemed to think she was some kind of stealth warfare expert. The Nexury and Krillian representatives were harder to read, but they acknowledged her presence with what she hoped were professional nods rather than expressions of contempt. Equipment check, Vex called out. Display your standard combat loadout for inspection. The other team members began revealing an impressive array of weaponry. Zeth's neural implants glowed brighter as he activated what appeared to be built-in weapon systems. SYX drew a blade made of crystallized energy that cast dancing shadows on the nearby walls. Krex simply extended his claws, which gleamed with a metallic sheen that suggested they'd been enhanced beyond their natural sharpness. All eyes turned to Sarah. She patted her tool belt self-consciously. I have a sonic wrench, a plasma cutter rated for industrial applications, some magnetic clamps, and a universal power adapter. The silence stretched uncomfortably. And food, she added, holding up her lunch bag. Interesting, Zeth said, his voice carrying the flat intonation of someone speaking through neural translation software. Chemical weapons disguised as sustenance? Just sandwiches, Sarah said weakly. Ah, SIX nodded, her crystalline blade humming with approval, psychological warfare. Consume nourishment in front of enemies to demonstrate your confidence in victory. Sarah decided to stop correcting these assumptions. If the galaxy's warriors wanted to believe that eating lunch was an intimidation tactic, she could work with that. Teams, take your starting positions, Vex announced. Trial begins in 60 seconds. Team Alpha gathered at the designated starting point, a piece of cover behind an overturned vehicle that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never seen a wheel. Sarah crouched next to Krex, trying not to think about how easily his claws could accidentally shred her. Human Sarah, Zeth said, his mental voice speaking directly into her consciousness through some form of neural broadcast, what is your tactical assessment of the approach route? Sarah studied the battlefield ahead. The obvious path to the command center was a straight line through what appeared to be the main street of the ruined city. It was also clearly a kill zone, with automated turrets positioned at regular intervals and sensor arrays that would detect any movement in the open. The direct route is a trap, she said. Those turrets are positioned to create overlapping fields of fire. Anyone trying to rush through would be caught in a crossfire pattern. Agreed, SYX said, her translator giving her voice a musical quality despite the tactical discussion. Alternative approach vectors? Sarah pointed to a series of damaged buildings along the left side of the arena. Those structures look like they connect through interior passages. If we can get inside the building complex, we might be able to move through the upper floors and avoid most of the ground-level defenses. The structural integrity appears compromised, Krex observed. Risk of collapse during movement. That's where I come in, Sarah said, pulling her sonic wrench from her belt. I can assess load-bearing capacity and identify safe passage routes. It's what I do for a living. The 3 alien warriors exchanged glances that she was beginning to recognize as their species equivalent of raised eyebrows. Trial commencing, Vex announced. Good luck, candidates. The first automated turret opened fire before they'd moved 5 meters from their starting position. Sarah yelped and ducked behind a piece of debris as energy bolts sizzled through the air where her head had been moments before. Definitely non-lethal, Krex commented as he casually deflected several shots with his armored forearms. Though quite energetic. Zeth's neural implants flared as he linked with his teammates' tactical systems. Information flowed directly into Sarah's mind, showing her the positions of known threats and the team's planned movement patterns. It was disorienting but useful. Moving to building entry point, Zeth announced. Human Sarah, lead structural assessment. Sarah sprinted toward the nearest damaged building, her tool belt jangling with each step. The structure looked like it had been hit by something large and explosive, leaving gaping holes in the walls and questionable stability throughout the framework. She ran her sonic wrench over the nearest load-bearing column and checked the readings. "This support beam is cracked but stable," she called back to her teammates. "The floor should hold our weight if we stay close to the outer walls." "How can you determine structural integrity so quickly?" SYX asked as the team regrouped near the building's entrance. "Sonic resonance analysis," Sarah explained, patting her wrench. "Sound waves travel differently through damaged materials." "It's basic maintenance engineering." "Fascinating," Krex murmured. "Human technology for rapid battlefield engineering assessment." Sarah was about to explain that it was actually just a standard tool for checking reactor housing integrity when more turret fire forced them to take cover inside the building. The interior was a maze of damaged corridors and collapsed ceilings. Sarah took point, using her sonic wrench to test each structural element before the team committed to a route. Her industrial experience with damaged facilities proved invaluable as she guided them through passages that looked impassable but were actually structurally sound. "Left corridor is blocked by debris, but the support framework is intact," she reported. "Right corridor has a clear path, but the ceiling joists are compromised. We go left and clear the debris manually." "Impressive tactical assessment," Zeth commented as they began moving aside chunks of fallen ceiling material. "Your species has clearly evolved sophisticated environmental analysis capabilities." Sarah wanted to point out that recognizing structural damage wasn't exactly advanced evolution, but she was beginning to understand that her perspective on what constituted normal human abilities was quite different from the galactic norm. They made good progress through the building complex, with Sarah's engineering knowledge allowing them to navigate passages that other teams would have dismissed as too dangerous. When they reached the third floor, they could see the command center objective through gaps in the exterior wall. "Approximately 200 meters to target," Zeth calculated. "Intermediate defense positions include 3 automated turrets and what appears to be a mobile patrol unit. Can we bypass them through the building system?" SYX asked. Sarah studied the route ahead. "Maybe. There's a maintenance corridor that runs along the building's outer edge. It connects to what looks like a service tunnel that leads toward the command center." "Maintenance corridors," Krex said approvingly. "Perfect for infiltration and sabotage approaches." Sarah pulled out her last sandwich and took a bite while considering their options. The maintenance route would be safer but slower. The direct approach would be faster but would require dealing with the automated defenses. "Why do you consume sustenance during tactical planning?" Zeth asked, his mental voice carrying what might have been curiosity. "I think better when I'm not hungry," Sarah said around a mouthful of peanut butter and jelly. "Low blood sugar affects cognitive function." "Remarkable," SYX observed. "Maintaining optimal biological performance during extended operations through strategic nutrient intake." Sarah offered half of her sandwich to Zeth. "Want some?" "It's really good." The Nexari soldier stared at the offered food for a long moment. "Is this part of your species' bonding ritual before combat?" "Not really. I just like sharing food with people I'm working with. Makes everything feel more friendly." Fascinating psychological preparation technique, Zeth accepted the sandwich half with his mechanical manipulators and examined it carefully. "What are the active compounds?" "Peanuts, grapes, and bread." "Nothing active about it except that it tastes good and gives you energy." Zeth took a cautious bite and chewed thoughtfully. "Remarkable flavor complexity for such simple ingredients." "The sweetness provides rapid energy while the protein content ensures sustained performance." "See? Good sandwich." "Your species has weaponized nutrition," Krex observed with what Sarah was learning to recognize as Thokarian approval. "Turn basic sustenance into tactical advantage through taste manipulation that encourages consumption." Sarah decided that explaining the concept of comfort food would probably just lead to more assumptions about human psychological warfare tactics. The maintenance corridor proved to be exactly what Sarah had hoped for. It was a standard industrial service passage designed for routine equipment access, complete with utility conduits and emergency lighting. Her years of working in similar spaces made navigation almost automatic. Temperature regulation system runs along this wall, she explained as they moved through the narrow space. Air recycling equipment is overhead. Power distribution follows that conduit pattern along the floor. Standard galactic maintenance architecture, Seth noted. Your species has already mastered conventional infrastructure design. Or maybe everybody just builds things the same way because it works, Sarah suggested. Unlikely coincidence, SYX said. This demonstrates advanced human intelligence gathering about galactic construction standards. They emerged from the maintenance system just 50 meters from the command center, having bypassed most of the arena's defensive perimeter. The objective building was a standard prefabricated structure that looked exactly like the emergency command post Sarah had seen at the power plant. Final approach, Krex announced, flexing his claws in anticipation. Prepare for direct assault on target structure. Wait, Sarah said, studying the building's exterior. This is a standard emergency command module. See those access panels along the base? That's where the primary power coupling connects to external generators. Significance? Zeth asked. Sarah pulled her plasma cutter from her tool belt and checked its charge level. If I can access the power coupling, I can shut down the building's defensive systems without triggering any alarms. It'll look like a routine power failure rather than a security breach. Brilliant, SYX said admiringly. Disable enemy defenses through infrastructure sabotage while maintaining operational stealth. It's really just basic electrical work, Sarah protested, but she was already moving toward the access panel. Her plasma cutter made quick work of the panel's security seal, and the power coupling inside was exactly what she'd expected to find. Standard galactic design, just like the maintenance corridors. 2 minutes later, the command center's defensive systems powered down in sequence. Emergency lighting activated, but the automated weapons and security sensors went dark. Approach clear, Seth announced. Objective accessible. They reached the command center without opposition and located the data terminal that contained their target intelligence. Sarah plugged her universal adapter into the system's access port and began downloading the required files. Mission completion in record time, Krex observed as data flowed into their portable storage device. Human technical specialist demonstrates exceptional battlefield engineering capabilities. Trial complete, Vex's voice announced through the arena's communication system. All teams returned to staging area for debriefing. As they made their way back through the now pacified battlefield, Sarah's teammates peppered her with questions about human engineering capabilities and infrastructure warfare techniques. She tried to explain that cutting power to buildings was a standard troubleshooting procedure, not a military tactic, but her explanations only seemed to reinforce their beliefs about human strategic thinking. Your species has clearly mastered the art of appearing non-threatening while possessing devastating technical capabilities, Seth concluded as they reached the staging area. We really haven't mastered anything, Sarah said. I just know how things work because I fix them when they break. Exactly, SYX agreed. Perfect cover story. Maintain the deception that your actions are routine maintenance rather than strategic sabotage. Sarah gave up trying to convince them and ate one of her cookies instead. If the galaxy wanted to believe that humanity's greatest weapon was their ability to troubleshoot equipment problems, she supposed there were worse reputations to have. Around them, other teams were arriving at the staging area with various degrees of success. Some had fought their way through the defensive perimeter using overwhelming firepower. Others had used advanced stealth technology to avoid detection. A few had failed to reach the objective at all and were nursing injuries from the arena's non-lethal but painful deterrent systems. Team Alpha had completed their objective faster than any other group, with minimal energy expenditure and no injuries. More importantly, they'd done it while establishing what Sarah was beginning to recognize as the foundation of an effective working relationship. Human Sarah, Zeth said as they waited for the official debriefing to begin, would you be willing to share more of your species' tactical nutrition during future operations? You mean my sandwiches? Yes. The flavor enhancement provides measurable performance benefits for extended mission duration. Sarah looked at her teammates' expectant faces and realized that somehow, in the space of a single morning, she'd accidentally convinced 3 of the galaxy's premier warriors that peanut butter and jelly sandwiches were advanced military rations. "Sure," she said, pulling out her remaining cookie and breaking it into 3 pieces. "But, next time, I'm definitely bringing more food." As her teammates solemnly consumed their portions of chocolate chip cookie, Sarah reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. 3 days ago, her biggest challenge had been explaining to Emma why the kitchen lights flickered when the microwave was running. Now she was apparently humanity's secret weapon in an intergalactic trial, armed with lunch food that everyone believed was sophisticated psychological warfare. She had no idea what tomorrow's trials would bring, but at least she was beginning to understand how to navigate the galaxy's assumptions about human capabilities. If they wanted to believe that fixing things and sharing food were elaborate military strategies, she could work with that. After all, she still had 2 days to convince the Galactic Council that humanity deserved a place among the stars. And, if she was very lucky, she might even figure out how to do it without accidentally starting an interstellar incident. Sarah's second day on Nexus Station began with an urgent message from Training Coordinator Vex delivered at 0500 station time. Instead of the scheduled tactical simulations, all candidates were being reassigned to emergency response protocols due to what the message termed an unprecedented crisis simulation opportunity. She dressed quickly and grabbed her tools, but hesitated over her lunch bag. Yesterday's success with the sandwiches had been completely accidental, but her teammates had seemed genuinely appreciative of the shared food. Sarah decided to pack extra provisions, just in case today's trials involved longer operations. The staging area buzzed with nervous energy as candidates from all species gathered for the emergency briefing. Sarah noticed that the usual species segregation had begun to break down, with mixed groups forming around individuals who had distinguished themselves in yesterday's trials. To her surprise, several beings she didn't recognize nodded respectfully as she passed. "Human technical specialist," a voice called out behind her. Sarah turned to see Zeth approaching, flanked by 2 other Nexari soldiers she hadn't met before. Squad leaders Nix and Hex request introduction to human tactical nutrition specialist. "I'm sorry, what?" Sarah said, then realized what had happened. "You told other people about the sandwiches." Affirmative. Combat efficiency improvements were significant enough to warrant tactical intelligence sharing with allied units. Before Sarah could process this fully, Krex's massive form appeared beside them, accompanied by 3 other Thokarian warriors whose size made the corridor feel distinctly cramped. "Human Sarah," Krex rumbled, "clanmates wish to understand human infrastructure warfare techniques. Yesterday's power system manipulation was most instructive." "I just unplugged some cables," Sarah protested, but was interrupted by the arrival of SIX and what appeared to be an entire delegation of Krillian warriors, their scales shifting through various shades of interested purple. "Battle Prime SIX has shared intelligence regarding human psychological warfare capabilities," announced their leader, a tall figure whose crystalline armor caught the light in complex patterns. "We seek to understand these comfort food tactical applications." Sarah found herself surrounded by some of the galaxy's most dangerous warriors, all of whom were apparently convinced that her lunch bag contained the secrets to advanced military strategy. "Attention all candidates," Vex's voice boomed through the staging area's communication system, "report to Crisis Command Center immediately. This is not a drill simulation." The journey to the Crisis Command Center revealed just how seriously the station was taking whatever emergency had developed. Security patrols moved through corridors with weapons activated, and blast shields had been deployed over critical system access points. Sarah's growing entourage of admirers discussed tactical possibilities in hushed tones as they made their way through the increasingly militarized station. The Crisis Command Center was a vast spherical chamber lined with holographic displays showing star maps, ship positions, and data streams that updated faster than human eyes could follow. At the center of it all stood a figure Sarah had only seen in briefing materials, Supreme Commander Thexbar of the Galactic Defense Force. Thexbar belonged to a species called the Architects, beings who looked like they had been designed by someone with a passion for geometric perfection and an unlimited supply of crystalline materials. His form was tall, angular, and translucent, with internal lights that pulsed in patterns that suggested deep thought. Candidates, Thexbar's voice resonated through both audible frequencies and some form of harmonic vibration that Sarah felt in her bones. 3 hours ago, we received a distress signal from the Kepler station in the Outer Rim territories. The station serves as a critical supply depot for our frontier defense network and houses approximately 50,000 civilian personnel from various species. The holographic display shifted to show a space station that dwarfed even Nexus Station, surrounded by what appeared to be a debris field of destroyed ships. Unknown attackers have disabled the station's primary systems and taken control of key infrastructure points. Communication is intermittent, but we have confirmed that the attackers are holding civilian populations in the station's central districts while systematically destroying defensive installations. Sarah felt her stomach drop. This wasn't a simulation or training exercise. Real people were in danger, and the assembled candidates were apparently being called upon to help with an actual rescue operation. Conventional rescue operations are not feasible, Thexbar continued. The attackers have demonstrated sophisticated anti-ship capabilities that have already destroyed 2 Defense Force scout vessels. However, intelligence analysis suggests that a small, multi-species team might be able to infiltrate the station through maintenance corridors and coordinate a liberation operation from within. The holographic display zoomed in on the station's structure, revealing the same type of maintenance and service infrastructure that Sarah had navigated yesterday. Her heart began to race as she realized why she'd been included in this briefing. Based on yesterday's trial performance, we have identified candidates whose skill sets are optimally suited for this mission profile, Thexbar announced. Team Alpha has been selected to lead the infiltration operation, with additional personnel assigned based on tactical requirements. Sarah looked around at her teammates from yesterday's trial and saw her own shock reflected in their faces. Zeth's neural implants were flickering rapidly as he processed the tactical implications. SIX's crystalline armor had shifted to a deep red that Sarah had learned indicated serious concern. Even Krex seemed subdued by the magnitude of what they were being asked to do. "Sir," Zeth said, his mental voice projecting clearly in the chamber's acoustic space, "with respect, we are trial candidates, not active Defense Force personnel. Are we qualified for actual rescue operations?" "Under normal circumstances, no," Thexbar admitted. "However, these are not normal circumstances. The attackers appear to have detailed intelligence about our standard operational procedures and equipment signatures. They have effectively countered every conventional approach we have attempted. What we need now is an unconventional approach using personnel and methods they won't expect." The display shifted again, showing detailed schematics of the station's interior layout. Sarah found herself studying the infrastructure systems automatically, noting power distribution patterns and life support routing that looked familiar from her work on Earth's orbital platforms. Human technical specialist Martinez, Thexbar's attention focused on Sarah, making her feel like she was being examined by a living crystal formation. Intelligence analysis indicates that the station's infrastructure follows standard galactic design protocols. Your demonstrated expertise in rapid structural assessment and systems manipulation makes you uniquely qualified to coordinate technical aspects of the operation. "Commander," Sarah said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded, "I appreciate the confidence, but I'm not a soldier. I'm a maintenance engineer. I fix things when they break, I don't conduct military operations. Yesterday, you successfully penetrated enemy defenses and disabled their security systems using techniques that our tactical computers failed to predict," Thexbar replied. "Whether you call it maintenance or warfare is irrelevant. The results speak for themselves." Sarah realized that there was no point in arguing. The galaxy's most advanced military minds had apparently decided that her ability to troubleshoot electrical problems qualified her as some kind of infrastructure warfare specialist. "What about the rest of the team?" she asked instead. "Squad leader Zeth will coordinate tactical communications and provide neural network liaison with station personnel. Battle Prime SIX will handle combat operations and serve as primary assault specialist. Warrior Krex will provide heavy support and structural breach capabilities." Thexbar paused, and his internal lights pulsed in what might have been the equivalent of a thoughtful expression. "Additionally, you will be joined by Specialist Kala of the Healer caste. A new figure stepped forward from the crowd of assembled candidates. Kala belonged to a species Sarah hadn't encountered before, with smooth blue-green skin and large, expressive eyes that seemed to radiate calm intelligence. Unlike the warriors surrounding them, Kala carried no visible weapons and wore flowing robes instead of armor. Specialist Kala will provide medical support and psychological stabilization for rescued civilians, Thexvar explained. Her expertise in interspecies trauma response will be essential for coordinating with the station's diverse population. It's an honor to work with the human tactical nutrition specialist, Kala said, her voice carrying a musical quality that made Sarah think of wind chimes. I'm particularly interested in learning about these comfort food applications for stress management. Sarah blinked. You've heard about the sandwiches? Word of your innovative approaches to team cohesion and performance enhancement has spread throughout the candidate population, Kala said seriously. The psychological benefits of shared sustenance are well documented, but your specific methodologies appear to be remarkably effective. They're just sandwiches, Sarah said weakly, but she was beginning to understand that explaining this would be futile. Transport departs in 1 hour, Thexvar announced. Use that time to prepare equipment and coordinate initial tactical planning. Commander Vex will provide detailed mission briefings during transit. The next hour passed in a blur of activity as Team Alpha was equipped with gear that seemed designed for actual military operations rather than training exercises. Sarah found herself wearing an environmental suit that could provide life support in hostile conditions, carrying communication equipment that interfaced directly with galactic standard networks, and equipped with tools that made her industrial sonic wrench look like a child's toy. Human Sarah, Krex said as they made their way to the transport bay, before we depart, might we experience human tactical nutrition distribution? Sarah looked at her teammates and realized that they were all watching her expectantly. Even Kala seemed interested in whatever ritual she was apparently expected to perform. Okay, Sarah said, pulling out the extra sandwiches she'd packed that morning. But we're going to do this right. Everybody sit down. The sight of some of the galaxy's deadliest warriors sitting in a circle on the deck of a military transport while waiting for a human in coveralls to distribute peanut butter and jelly sandwiches was probably one that would have broken several galactic military protocols under normal circumstances. This is peanut butter, Sarah explained as she handed out sandwich halves. It's made from ground nuts and provides protein and healthy fats. This is jelly, made from fruit, which gives you quick energy from natural sugars. The bread holds it all together and adds carbohydrates for sustained energy release. Remarkable nutritional engineering, Kala observed, taking notes on a data pad as she examined her sandwich. The combination optimizes both immediate and long-term metabolic requirements. Plus it tastes good, Sarah added, taking a bite of her own sandwich. That's actually the most important part. Food should make you happy. Psychological enhancement through flavor manipulation, Seth noted, his neural implants recording everything for later analysis. Ingenious approach to morale maintenance under stress conditions. The sharing ritual creates social bonds within the tactical unit, SIX observed, her scale shifting to a warm yellow that indicated contentment. Team cohesion improves through synchronized consumption of pleasant sustenance. Sarah watched her teammates eat their sandwiches with the serious concentration of scientists conducting important research, and felt a strange mixture of amusement and responsibility. Somehow, her daughter's favorite lunch food had become a cornerstone of what the galaxy apparently considered advanced human military psychology. Transport preparing for departure, announced the ship's pilot through the communication system. Destination Kepler Station, estimated transit time 4 hours. As the transport ship detached from Nexus Station and accelerated toward their destination, Sarah stared out the porthole at the stars beyond and tried to process what was happening. 12 hours ago, she'd been a trial candidate hoping to prove that humanity deserved consideration for galactic membership. Now she was part of a rescue operation that could determine the fate of 50,000 people. She thought about Emma, probably getting ready for school on Earth, completely unaware that her mother was traveling through space to help save an alien space station. Sarah had promised to bring back pictures and stories, but she hadn't expected those stories to involve actual adventures. Human Sarah, Kala said, settling into the seat beside her, may I ask about the psychological preparation techniques your species uses for high-stress operations? We don't really have specific techniques, Sarah admitted. We just try to do our best and help each other get through difficult situations. Fascinating, Kala made more notes. So the apparent simplicity conceals sophisticated emotional regulation strategies? Not really. We just... Sarah paused, trying to find words that wouldn't be misinterpreted as advanced psychological warfare. We try to be kind to each other. Share what we have. Work together. Basic stuff. Basic for humans, perhaps, Kala said thoughtfully, but remarkably advanced by galactic standards. Most species develop complex protocols for managing interspecies cooperation. Your approach appears to achieve better results through intuitive behavioral patterns. Sarah decided to change the subject. What can you tell me about the station we're going to? Kepler Station serves as a hub for 23 different species in the Outer Rim territories, Kala explained, her datapad displaying detailed information about the station's demographics. Primarily civilian populations engaged in mining, agriculture, and trade operations. The diversity creates complex social dynamics that require careful management under normal conditions. And, under crisis conditions? Panic responses vary dramatically between species. Some become aggressive, others withdraw completely. Some require constant social contact, others need isolation to process stress. Managing evacuation procedures for such a diverse population is extremely challenging. Sarah thought about the emergency drills at the power plant, where everyone knew their roles and evacuation routes. Managing the same process for thousands of people from different species, each with different psychological needs and physical requirements, sounded like a nightmare. How do you normally handle that kind of complexity? She asked. Extensive advance planning, detailed psychological profiles for each individual, and specialized response teams trained in species-specific behavioral management, Kala said. None of which will be available during our operation. So we'll have to improvise. Exactly. Which is why your species' apparent expertise in adaptive social coordination will be invaluable. Sarah wanted to point out that she had no expertise in social coordination beyond trying to be polite and helpful, but she was beginning to understand that her perspective on normal human behavior was quite different from how other species interpreted those same actions. The transport ship's communication system activated with an incoming transmission from Kepler Station. The signal was weak and filled with static, but voices could be heard in the background speaking multiple languages that Sarah's translator struggled to interpret. East Sector 7, life support failing, they're moving toward the civilian quarters, need immediate assistance. The transmission cut off, leaving the team in tense silence. For hours until arrival, Zeth announced, his neural implants flickering as he processed the available intelligence data. Recommend using transit time for detailed mission planning. Sarah pulled out her remaining cookies and broke them into pieces. If they were going to spend the next 4 hours planning a rescue operation for 50,000 aliens while traveling through space at impossible speeds, they were definitely going to need more tactical nutrition. All right, she said, distributing cookie pieces to her teammates, let's figure out how to save a space station. As her team gathered around the small table in the transport's main cabin, data pads spread out between them and, the taste of chocolate chips providing comfort in the face of impossible odds, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 2 days. Emma would definitely have some interesting stories to hear when Mommy finally made it home. The transport ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system to a scene that made Sarah's stomach clench with dread. Kepler Station hung against the star field like a wounded giant, its normally brilliant running lights flickering erratically. Debris from destroyed ships drifted in slowly expanding clouds around the station, and several sections showed the telltale scorch marks of weapons fire. Preliminary sensor analysis complete, announced the ship's pilot, a Centauri whose 4 arms worked multiple control surfaces simultaneously. Station main power is at 30% capacity. Life support systems are functioning but inconsistent across different sectors. Multiple hull breaches detected, but most appear to be intentional sabotage rather than structural damage from weapons fire. Sarah studied the tactical display on her datapad, noting the systematic nature of the damage. They're not trying to destroy the station, they're trying to control it. Look at the pattern of disabled systems. They've taken out communications, weapons, and external sensors, but left life support and artificial gravity mostly intact. Agreed, Zeth said, his neural implants processing the incoming data streams. This suggests the attackers want to maintain the station's population alive but helpless. Possible motivations include ransom demands, political leverage, or strategic positioning. The attack pattern indicates sophisticated knowledge of standard galactic station design, SIX observed, her crystalline armor shifting to tactical blue as she analyzed the weapon's signatures. These are not random raiders. Someone provided them with detailed intelligence about the station's defensive capabilities and infrastructure vulnerabilities. Krex studied the debris field with predatory focus. Ship fragments show advanced weaponry impacts. The attackers possess military-grade equipment and training. This was a coordinated assault by professional forces. Kala reviewed medical data streaming from the station's emergency broadcasts. Casualty reports indicate minimal civilian fatalities but widespread psychological trauma. The attackers appear to be using fear and intimidation rather than outright violence to maintain control. Smart tactics, Sarah said grimly. Easier to manage scared people than angry people. But that also means they're probably planning something that requires the civilians to remain alive and relatively functional. The transport moved closer to the station under minimal power to avoid detection, using the debris field as cover. As they approached, more details became visible on the sensor displays. Sarah could see that the attackers had stationed guard ships at key points around the station's perimeter and established what appeared to be a command post in the station's central hub. Insertion point identified, the pilot announced. Maintenance airlock 47 Delta appears to be unguarded and still functional. The surrounding area shows minimal attacker presence. Sarah examined the station schematics on her datapad. That airlock connects to the primary maintenance shaft network. From there, we should be able to access most of the station's systems without using the main corridors. Time to final approach? Zeth asked. 15 minutes, the pilot replied. Recommend final equipment checks and mission review. The team spent the remaining time ensuring that their gear was properly calibrated and their communication links were functioning. Sarah double-checked her toolkit, making sure she had everything needed to interface with the station's systems. She also distributed the last of her emergency food supplies, figuring that they might not have another chance to eat for quite a while. Human Sarah, Kala said as she carefully wrapped her sheriff sandwich in a preservation field, I must admit to curiosity about how your species developed such effective stress management techniques. We didn't develop them, Sarah said, checking the charge level on her plasma cutter. We just learned that sharing food makes difficult situations feel less overwhelming. It's something humans have been doing for thousands of years. Yet most galactic species require extensive psychological conditioning to achieve similar levels of cooperative behavior under stress, Kala observed. Your approach appears to be instinctive rather than trained. Maybe that's because we evolved as social creatures who depended on cooperation for survival, Sarah suggested. Taking care of each other isn't advanced psychology, it's just what you do when you're part of a community. Remarkable, Kala made notes on her datapad. Natural selection for cooperative behavior patterns. This explains the observed effectiveness of human social integration techniques. The transport ship settled against the station's hull with barely perceptible contact. Magnetic clamps engaged automatically, and the airlock systems synchronized between the two vessels. Docking complete, the pilot announced. Station atmosphere reads as breathable for all team members. Environmental suits recommended as precautionary measure. Final systems check, Zeth announced, activating his neural link with the team's communication network. All personnel report readiness status. Weapons systems operational, SIX confirmed, her crystalline blade humming with stored energy. Breach equipment ready, Krex reported, extending claws that had been enhanced with molecular cutting edges. Medical kit secured, psychological support protocols activated, Kala said, adjusting the settings on several devices that Sarah didn't recognize. Engineering tools functional, structural analysis systems online, Sarah added, patting her sonic wrench. Ready to break things and fix things as required. The airlock cycled with mechanical precision, and the team stepped into Kepler Station's maintenance section. The air carried the metallic tang of recycled atmosphere and the subtle vibrations of machinery operating under stress. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red-tinged glow that made shadows seem deeper and more threatening. Station interior confirmed, Zeth reported, his implants interfacing with the station's communication network. Accessing local data streams for situational awareness. Information flowed into Sarah's consciousness through the neural link, showing her the layout of nearby corridors and the positions of station personnel. The maintenance area appeared to be deserted, but thermal sensors indicated significant activity in the civilian sectors. Population distribution analysis, Kala said, reviewing the incoming data. Approximately 45,000 civilians are concentrated in the central habitat zones. Security patterns suggest they're being held in designated areas under guard. Guard positions? SYX asked. 12 confirmed sentry locations, with patrol units moving between sectors, Seth replied. The attackers have established a command center in the station's primary control room and appear to be systematically accessing critical systems. Sarah pulled up the station's infrastructure schematics on her datapad. If they're in the main control room, they have access to life support, power distribution, and artificial gravity controls. They could make things very uncomfortable for the civilian population if they wanted to. Current life support status? Krex asked. Stable but inefficient, Sarah said, reading the system diagnostics. They've disabled several backup systems, probably to demonstrate their control over the station's critical functions. The civilian areas are getting adequate air and heat, but there's no margin for error. Psychological pressure tactic, Kala observed. Keep the population dependent on the attacker's goodwill for basic survival needs. So what's their endgame? Sarah wondered aloud. They've got control of the station and the population, but they can't hold this position indefinitely. The Defense Force will eventually send a full fleet. Unknown, Zeth admitted. But their current actions suggest they're buying time for some larger objective. The team moved deeper into the maintenance section, following corridors that reminded Sarah of the industrial spaces she worked in back on Earth. The architecture was functional and utilitarian, designed for efficiency rather than aesthetics. Her sonic wrench provided constant feedback about the station's structural condition as they moved. Power distribution network is running hot, she reported quietly. They've been drawing more energy than the system was designed to handle. If they keep pushing it, we could start seeing cascading failures in non-essential systems. Intentional or accidental? SYX asked. Hard to say. Could be inexperience with galactic standard infrastructure, or it could be part of their plan to put additional pressure on the station's population. They reached a junction that connected to the primary service shaft network. Through the translucent access panels, Sarah could see the main conduits that carried power, data, and life support throughout the station. More importantly, she could hear voices coming from the shaft network, civilian voices speaking in several different languages. People are hiding in the service areas, she whispered, activating her sonic wrench's passive scanning mode. Thermal signatures indicate small groups scattered throughout the maintenance network. Survivors who avoided the initial roundup, Zeth concluded. They're probably terrified and running low on supplies. We need to make contact, Kala said immediately. Assess their condition and coordinate evacuation procedures. Negative, SIX interjected. Contact with survivor groups risks exposing our presence to attacker patrols. Mission parameters require stealth approach until we can neutralize the command structure. The mission parameters also include protecting civilian lives, Kala replied firmly. These people need immediate assistance. Sarah listened to the voices in the service shafts and made a decision that surprised her with its clarity. We do both. Kala, you make contact with the survivors and provide whatever medical assistance you can. Establish communication protocols and prepare them for coordinated evacuation. The rest of us continue to the command center. Splitting the team violates standard tactical doctrine, Seth pointed out. Standard tactical doctrine doesn't account for the fact that we have someone specifically trained in interspecies psychological support, Sarah replied. Kala can do more good helping the civilians than she can sneaking through maintenance corridors with us. The human is correct, Krex said after a moment of consideration. Specialist Kala's skills are better utilized in civilian support role. Agreed, Zeth conceded. However, Specialist Kala will require security escort. Warrior Krex, can you provide protection while maintaining communication link with primary assault team? Acceptable, Krex nodded. Clanmates often operate in small units while maintaining tactical coordination. All right, Sarah said, pulling out her emergency food supplies and dividing them between the two subteams. Take these. The civilians have probably been without proper food for hours, and you'll need your energy for whatever comes next. Human tactical nutrition distribution, Kala said appreciatively, accepting her share of the remaining snacks. This will help with both physiological needs and psychological morale among the survivor groups. As they prepared to split up, Sarah realized that she was making command decisions for a team of galactic warriors in the middle of a rescue operation. 6 months ago, her biggest leadership challenge had been coordinating maintenance schedules between different shifts at the power plant. Communication check every 15 minutes, she said, testing the neural link that connected all team members. If anyone encounters serious opposition, we abort individual objectives and regroup immediately. Understood, Zeth confirmed. Primary team will proceed to command center via maintenance route. Secondary team will establish civilian contact and begin evacuation preparation. One more thing, Sarah added, opening her toolkit and retrieving several emergency glow sticks. These provide steady light without drawing power from station systems. If the attackers start cutting power to pressure the civilians, you'll still be able to see what you're doing. Krex examined the glow stick with interest. Chemical illumination independent of external power sources. Clever backup system. Just a flashlight that doesn't need batteries, Sarah said, but she was beginning to understand that the galaxy interpreted even her most mundane preparations as evidence of advanced tactical thinking. The teams separated at the junction, with Kala and Krex moving toward the areas where civilian voices had been detected. Sarah watched them disappear into the service corridor network before leading Zeth and SIX deeper into the station's infrastructure. The route to the command center took them through sections of the station that Sarah was beginning to recognize as standard galactic design. Power conduits, data cables, and life support ducting followed predictable patterns that made navigation relatively straightforward. Her sonic wrench provided continuous feedback about the condition of the systems around them, painting a picture of a station under stress but still fundamentally sound. Structural analysis indicates the attackers have been selective in their sabotage, she reported as they moved through a particularly complex junction. They've disabled specific systems while leaving the underlying infrastructure intact. This isn't random destruction, they know exactly what they're doing. Which supports the theory that they have inside knowledge of station operations, SIX observed. Or access to detailed intelligence gathered through surveillance, Zeth added. The level of system-specific knowledge required suggests extensive preparation time. They paused at an access panel that provided visual contact with one of the main corridor networks. Through the transparent aluminum viewing port, Sarah could see attacker patrols moving with military precision through areas that should have been bustling with civilian activity. The attackers wore environmental suits that concealed their species' identity, but their equipment and tactics suggested professional military training. Guard rotation appears to be on 20-minute intervals, Zeth observed, recording patrol patterns through his neural implants. Standard defensive protocol for occupied territory. They're treating this like a conquered city rather than a raid, Sarah noted. That suggests they plan to hold the station for an extended period. Which raises the question of their exit strategy, SIX said. Eventually, they'll need to leave or face overwhelming Defense Force response. Sarah thought about the systematic nature of the sabotage and the careful control of civilian populations. What if they're not planning to leave? What if this is about establishing a permanent presence in Outer Rim territory? Possible, Zeth agreed. Use Kepler Station as a forward base for further operations against Defense Force positions. Or as a bargaining chip in larger political negotiations, SIX suggested. Either possibility meant that the civilians were in much more danger than a simple raid would suggest. If the attackers were planning long-term occupation, they would need to demonstrate their control through increasingly harsh measures against the population. Communication from secondary team, Kala's voice came through the neural link. We've made contact with survivor groups. Approximately 200 civilians in the maintenance areas, including family units with children. Medical conditions range from minor injuries to severe psychological trauma. They've been without adequate food or water for 12 hours. Can you coordinate evacuation procedures? Sarah asked. Working on it, Krex's gravelly voice replied. However, the survivor groups are scattered across multiple sections and many are too frightened to move. We need to establish secure routes to evacuation points before we can begin large-scale civilian movement. Understood, Sarah said. Continue civilian support operations. We're approaching the command center. The final approach to the station's control room required them to move through a section that brought them closer to areas under direct attacker control. Sarah could hear voices speaking in an unfamiliar language coming from nearby corridors, and her sonic wrench detected the distinctive energy signatures of advanced weapons systems. Command center accessible through primary maintenance access, Zeth reported, reviewing station schematics. However, approach route passes through zones with confirmed attacker presence. Alternative routes? SYX asked. Sarah studied the infrastructure layout on her datapad. There's a secondary access through the power distribution hub, but it requires crawling through spaces that weren't designed for humanoid movement. Define weren't designed for humanoid movement, SYX said suspiciously. Think pipeline maintenance, Sarah said. Tight spaces, limited visibility, and, if something goes wrong, very little room to maneuver. But, it gets us to the command center without exposing ourselves to patrols? Zeth asked. Should. The power distribution hub connects directly to the control room's primary systems. If I can access the main distribution panel, I might be able to do more than just get us inside. Such as? Sarah smiled for the first time since they'd arrived at the station. Such as showing these attackers what happens when a human maintenance engineer gets annoyed about people breaking her equipment. As they prepared to enter the power distribution network, Sarah reflected on how completely her situation had changed. 24 hours ago, she'd been trying to convince galactic warriors that she was just an ordinary engineer. Now she was planning to use those same engineering skills to take back an entire space station. She checked her toolkit one more time and activated her sonic wrench's most powerful settings. It was time to demonstrate that sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was someone who knew exactly how everything worked and wasn't afraid to break a few things to fix the bigger problem. The power distribution hub turned out to be exactly what Sarah had expected, a cramped, poorly lit space filled with the humming energy of a station's entire electrical grid. Conduits carrying enough power to level a city block ran in neat parallel lines above their heads, while control systems that managed the flow of energy throughout Kepler Station lined the walls like the neurons of some vast technological brain. Sarah felt completely at home. This is identical to the setup we use on Earth's orbital platforms, she said, running her sonic wrench over the primary distribution panel. Same basic design, same control protocols, even the same safety interlocks. Galactic standardization makes infrastructure maintenance more efficient, Zeth observed, though his neural implants were clearly having difficulty interfacing with the tightly packed electronic systems around them. More than that, Sarah said, accessing diagnostic screens that displayed the station's current power allocation. It means I know exactly how to turn their occupation into a very bad day. The diagnostic data painted a clear picture of what the attackers had done to gain control of the station. They had systematically disabled backup systems while maintaining primary power to essential functions, creating a scenario where they could threaten the civilian population by cutting life support without actually killing anyone. It was clever, but it relied on the assumption that no one would be able to access the primary distribution systems. Current power allocation shows 70% going to life support and artificial gravity for civilian areas, Sarah reported. 20% allocated to their command center and communication systems. 10% maintaining minimal lighting and emergency functions. Can you redirect power to disable their command capabilities? SYX asked, her crystalline armor shifting to combat configuration as she maintained watch on the access points. Better than that, Sarah said, her fingers dancing across control interfaces that felt as familiar as her kitchen appliances back home. I can give them exactly what they think they want while setting up something they definitely don't expect. She began making adjustments to the power grid, rerouting energy flows in patterns that would appear normal to casual observation but would create very specific vulnerabilities in the attacker's control systems. It was delicate work, requiring her to balance multiple competing electrical loads while maintaining the appearance of normal operations. Explain the tactical approach, Zeth requested, recording everything for later analysis. The attackers have taken control of the command center, but they're relying on the station's automated systems to maintain their position, Sarah said as she worked. They probably have a few technical specialists, but they're not infrastructure engineers. They know how to operate the controls, but they don't understand how the underlying systems actually work. Significance? Watch, Sarah said, implementing the final sequence of her power redistribution plan. I'm giving them exactly what they want, complete control over the station's power grid. But I'm also making one tiny modification to the feedback loops in their control systems. On the diagnostic display, power flow indicators shifted to show the attacker's command center now had access to every electrical system on the station. From their perspective, they had just gained total control over life support, artificial gravity, lighting, and every other system that could be used to threaten the civilian population. They now believe they can shut down any system on the station with a simple command, Sarah explained. But what they don't know is that I programmed a 15-second delay into their control inputs, and I've given myself override authority that they can't access from their terminals. Elaborate, SIX said, though her tone suggested she was beginning to appreciate the elegance of Sarah's approach. When they try to use their new power controls to threaten civilians,